Hello, live from the Hub Studios in the Tascadero. This is a Clarion Voice. Good morning. This is Mark Sobowitz for Clarion Voice, and we hope that you're having a good Tuesday morning and enjoying the day. Today, we're going to be talking about forgiving yourself. And the question is, have you? And so we want to talk about that today. And Mike, good morning. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. How are you, Mark?
Okay.
A little excited you are.
Yes.
Excited about this subject, are you?
Yes, I am just a little bit. The question is, have you forgiven yourself? Now, we have to understand, at least in my mind, what is forgiveness? Forgiveness is, just trying to let go. I believe let go of your sins, because as I was reading in preparing for this, forgiveness and salvation are somewhat related. Because when you forgive yourself, then you let go of your past sins and things of that nature. And salvation is delivering you from the consequences of the sin. And so, as I'm coming to find out, there's a lot of layers involved here, as far as forgiving yourself. And from a personal standpoint, when it comes to my younger brother, Richard, who's 3 years younger than I am, I haven't spoken to him in like 18 years, something like that. And I don't think I've quite forgiven him for, the way that he's treated me, as far as in relationship to when my mother passed, and things of that nature. There's a whole lot more to the story than, but that's basically what it comes down to. And so, Mike, are there things that you have not forgiven yourself for? Do you think?
Um, well, you kind of caught me off guard on that one. I don't know,
Okay.
and you won't know until the Holy Spirit reveals it to you. And I really do believe that. And I think, did you say that you haven't forgiven your brother? Is that what you just said?
Well, I have.
Haven't
Let me put
quite.
it into context. I
Okay.
haven't forgiven myself for the way that I acted towards him.
Oh, I see.
Okay,
So it's not like
because
you haven't forgiven your brother. You've forgiven your brother.
yes, I've forgiven my brother, but I haven't forgiven myself for because when my mother was, she passed away from lung cancer, and so they lived in Los Angeles, and so I was up here, and so I didn't get a chance to, go down as much as I would like, and I felt somewhat guilty about that,
Oh,
you see, and so, but as it turns out, a month before my mother passed away, they always told me, "Don't come." Don't come, whatever, it's not necessary and whatever. And so, of course, I bought into that and just didn't. But the one time that I did go down with my late wife, Kathy, my mother was in a retirement home and she was having trouble breathing and what have you because of the lung cancer. And she had stopped treatment from the chemotherapy and the radiation that she was receiving. And so we went down at the beginning of December of, about 16 years ago. And it was probably the best thing I ever did because 3 weeks later, as it turns out, my mother passed away. But I had a chance to spend time with her, along with Kathy, my late wife, and so that was the one time that I just said, "Okay, enough. I'm just going to do this." So I didn't buy into the lie of not going down, and so I think that I haven't forgiven myself for that. I could have gone down more often, but I was working and things like that, and so there's all sorts of excuses involved in that. But that's one thing that sort of lingers in my mind about that. So, anyways, and I have to understand God's forgiveness.
Yeah. So it was hard for you to get over that fact. It's a tough one. I mean, I was in Hawaii, I was living there when my mom passed away. And I had seen her, same thing, weeks, maybe a month prior, 'cause I went down I flew in to see her. And I people were kind of looking at me strange because I didn't fly back for her funeral, which was in Mississippi.
Oh, I see.
You know, kind of same reasons that you know, but yeah, I clearly heard the Lord speak to me, and it was on a Sunday morning when I found out that she had passed, and people thought that I should have been more devastated. But when I first heard, when my dad first told me that my mom, he called it wildfire cancer. Uh, he said she had 2 weeks to live. Well, she lived 20 years,
Oh,
you know, long enough to see most of her grandkids born.
wow, that's great.
Yeah, so that's really great.
Right.
But, you know, what do you do in 20 years? It's like you prep your heart,
Mhm.
for it's going to come to be a final time. And I know we've talked about this, about how you prep yourself if your wife died,
Right.
or for them, if I died, how you'd handle it. Would you still be serving the Lord? Would you give it all up? Would you blame God? You know what I mean?
Right.
And if you've had the type of time that I had, 20 years, you know,
Mhm.
the back and forth, the chemo, the radiation, the sickness, and everything, and I became in high school, I became the guy who did all the shopping. My mom taught me how to go clip coupons and everything. So we spent a lot of time together, throughout her sickness. Um, but there was nothing to forgive me for in that aspect.
Mhm.
I didn't feel, because the Lord spoke to me and says, just let the dead bury the dead. And that was a quote right from the Bible that Jesus talked about, as far as the one man says, I will follow you, but first let me
Yes,
bury.
right.
Remember
Right.
that? And he says, let the dead bury the dead. And um, I for whatever reason, I don't judge anybody or anything for that, the way it happened. But when it comes to forgiveness, I find that forgiving yourself
Mhm.
was a main key to losing those kinds of memories or images in my mind that had been haunting me.
Yes, right.
And that's where not forgiving yourself came in for me.
Mhm.
So I had the opportunity, and I kept telling God, I've asked for forgiveness for these images that are still floating around in my mind. Why am I still seeing this? This was in my childhood, these things, this is in my teen years, and I'm still, I've been redeemed,
Yeah.
and people say, well, you got to renew your mind. Okay, great. They're still coming.
Yes,
What am I
right.
doing wrong? And I just said, Lord, I've asked for forgiveness for so many times. It wasn't him bringing the memories up. It was me bringing the memories up.
Right.
And that's when he spoke to me again and says, well, you need to forgive yourself for what you did. He says, because I've already forgiven you.
That's the thing that people that haven't forgiven themselves have to realize that God has already forgiven you, and He's given you the gift of salvation because He's delivered you from the consequences of,
Right.
the sin or whatever. And I think that a lot of times, from a mental health issue, there's a lot of guilt that people heap upon themselves, and you're right. It isn't God that's doing it. It's you.
What? Who do you think it harms? Who do you think it harms that you don't forgive yourself?
I think it harms your relatives, your friends, and it hurts yourself. I
Yeah,
mean, because you don't make progress.
right. It's the number one would be yourself, right? Number two would be the people that you affect around you because you're a grumpy person because you can't seem to shake these thoughts, these memories. And I find it interesting the more I look into what's going on in the human body
Yes, uh-huh.
that, like specifically, they found the same cells that are in your brain in your heart, memory cells
Oh,
that are
interesting.
that actually reside in your heart.
Okay.
So when people say I've got a heartache
Oh, I
for
see.
memories or whatever, it's
Right.
because your heart remembers. So it's like there's really a physical manifestation
Sure.
to some things.
That may be because, and that's why, yeah, when people that have been married for, a long time or whatever,
Exactly. Right.
that, if one spouse dies, then there's so much heartache that in some cases,
In
the,
some
the other
cases,
spouse
right.
passes away just as quickly. That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
So, but yeah, there's a freedom, and if you don't forgive others, you're not just harming yourself because you've judged, you are harming them by keeping them in that place that you put them in,
Yeah.
where they can't be free.
Well, I remember, my my ex brother-in-law. He just passed away earlier this year,
Mhm.
and he broke a trust with my sister-in-law uh, within their marriage relationship.
Okay.
Okay, and so I think that the family, to some extent, forgave him
Mhm.
because he was still allowed to interact with the at holidays and things like that. But I remember that it took a long time for my Kathy to forgive him because he hurt my sister-in-law, her sister, very much so. And so, from a standpoint of forgiveness, my family is a great example of forgiveness, letting go of the sin that was committed,
Mhm.
and just accepting, not liking what happened, but forgiving him.
Right.
There's a difference,
Mhm.
because I did some when I was younger. I didn't interact with my family because of the influence of my first wife. That's on me, okay?
Uh-huh.
But I don't think that my mother forgave me for that.
Mm.
She, because well, maybe she didn't like it, but I think in some way she forgave me for not interacting, because the only reason I came back into the family is because my father was ill. Okay, and so I, developed relations again, reconnected, but somehow or another, I don't think that she, accepted the fact that I did what I did.
Mm.
Um, so it's really, very interesting. And you bring up the point about forgiving others. There's the story in the Bible about the servant who is forgiven this great debt by the king, and then he turns around and doesn't forgive somebody else, who owed him a
For 20
little amount,
bucks. Yeah.
and so it's like if you don't forgive others, then you're forsaking the gift of forgiveness, God's forgiveness and salvation that you were given freely.
Mm.
You didn't earn it, you didn't do anything. That's just the way that's God's nature. He just gives it to you freely, and you have to, accept that. So it's interesting, from a psychological standpoint, where if you don't forgive other people, then that's just as bad as not forgiving yourself.
Right.
I don't think. I mean, that's
I find it, and I tell people this, um, never stop somebody from blessing you.
Right.
From time to time, I'll have somebody like, buy my breakfast, say, and I don't, you know, I could pay for it, but they're like, well, no, I want to do this. Okay. Because then you're pulling a blessing away from them. It's kind of like, so it's kind of the same thing, but in a different
Yeah.
view.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to help people, let them bless you.
But it's hard for people sometimes, depending on their
I know,
circumstances,
and pride
to
and,
not
and
be
things get
helped.
in the way. So, you're showing humility by allowing people to bless you,
Right.
you know,
Sure.
and I welcome it freely, freely you have received. That means I'm going to freely give.
I think that not forgiving yourself is a form of bondage
Yep.
because you're, yes, enslaved to to this attitude, this guilt, this shame, whatever it was that has caused you to not forgive yourself. It's a form of bondage. If you don't break free from that somehow or another, then you're not going to progress in your relationship with God because forgiveness is relational. I mean, God is relating to you and saying, okay, I forgive you. And
Yeah. There's a thing about, for me, okay, because like everybody else, I'm working out my salvation with fear and trembling.
right, exactly. Yes.
So working out my own salvation, and and so in that, it's not like you don't remember things that were done against you.
Right.
All
Okay.
right, it's, you can have the memory of harm, but you can't let that harm like hook your heart and pull it into a place that it shouldn't go. So it doesn't affect you physically
Right.
or emotionally even. It's like, yes, I learned this lesson one day. You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying?
Sure.
When this happened to me in regards to this, to whoever, this person, but when I think about the memory and I share about the memory to help others, and that's the only reason why it comes up, number one. Number two, it doesn't, I don't have all of the feelings that I felt while I was going through it. It's like the heart memory, the brain memory, all the body memory.
Hmm.
The whole thing does not, well, it's like hearing a certain song and you get these,
Yes.
you can smell smells
Right.
that you
Right.
had during that time. If those things aren't affecting you, then you have entered into forgiveness stage.
Hmm.
It's when you talk about it and that seething bile, comes up into your mouth and you
Right.
want to wring their neck.
Yeah. Right.
I can't believe, and I had that happen recently. I was getting hooked because, I mean, within about 2 minutes, I had these two drivers just do some awful things, like swinging around me and all the way. It just was really weird. And there was an opportunity. The opportunity was, hang on to this, tell somebody how bad they drove, remember the whole detail and just, and I went, no. I mean, I just yelled out no. And I had to say it like a few times.
Hmm.
Then it was gone. I mean, like I didn't have any, I don't even remember what it was specifically now, but we have the ad opportunity every moment. Every moment in our lives, we have an opportunity to say no to the things that will eventually harm us and keep us from forgiving others and forgiving ourselves for being a party to it.
Yeah, because it's really interesting the mind, body, spirit, the
The connection. Yeah.
connection. Because it would be interesting, to find out, to take like a study. There's probably been studies done about that, but in relationship to forgiveness, that if you're enslaved to, the circumstance and you don't forgive yourself, okay, so that affects your mind. So how does it affect your body and your spirit? What is the manifestation of that, physically or spiritually? Because I sensed, that there are there are people within the church, let's say, who are in a leadership capacity. And sometimes, we've heard different things about people in leadership, doing something that you wouldn't expect a person in leadership to do. And have they forgiven themselves, or, what kind of an effect does it have on their walk or the connection with the congregation, things like that. Um, it's really interesting because it happened at the church that I go to here locally. There was a pastor who had done something. I forget what it was. It doesn't really matter. That's not the point. The point is that I think ultimately he was forgiven for what he had done. Although I had not talked to him to hear what how that was settling within him, as far as whether or not he broke free from that the sin, and whether or not he forgave himself
Right.
for what he did. So I would be interested just to see, if you have a person that comes, let's say you're counseling somebody, and their issue is for not forgiving themselves. It would be interesting to find out, okay, because you haven't done this, how has it affected you? Physically or emotionally or what have you. I mean, the emotionally we connect with more so than the physical, because people tell me, with what I did in my career previously, working wise, how did you not get an ulcer or whatever? I said, I I don't know. I guess I just sort of left it at the office, and not let it affect me. Um, but I think from a relational standpoint, I think that I'm relating closer to God, where I feel I'm more sensitive to what I say, or how I conduct myself and things like that, and I forgive myself for that more so than because God is saying, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why are you beating yourself up?"
Have you heard? You may have heard this, but their class, it was a course, and they had this vial of water, you know, cylinder, and they had a little name on the bottom, and they told the students as you walk by, you know, to say kind words to this one, mercy to that one, grace and peace to another, love to another, as well as hate, you know. And they took the water, they froze it, and the crystals were just amazing,
Huh.
and they were all different, but they were beautiful until you get to the hate. So you can actually speak and create love or good things to people. I mean, if you can do it to water,
Well, yeah,
water.
right.
So that's how powerful our words are.
Proverbs says, "A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver."
Yeah.
And so I think that that's
Or
something.
gossip can be like choice morsels,
Mm,
right?
yeah, right.
Ooh, you know.
But that's really interesting, because if you in your self talk, if you say words that are hateful, or you
Right.
build up, like you were saying, the bile and whatever, then that's going to have an effect, more so than anything anybody else says. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy when it comes to our thinking and all that, and
Yeah.
so it's something to
Seeing
think
seeing
about,
as how
all
we're
these different layers.
96% we're made up of water, by 96%,
Yeah.
right? Is that what
Right.
it is? Is that the number? It's something crazy like that.
Yeah,
So speak love to yourself and forgiveness.
that's it. I couldn't have said it better myself. You have to forgive yourself, folks. It's in some cases it's not easy. I understand that, and I think that if there's something in your life that you need to forgive yourself of, remember, God has already forgiven you, and He's given you the gift of salvation. He's delivered you from that sin, whatever it is. And so I hope that in our conversation, that you reflect on that and think about what you're doing to yourself by not forgiving yourself, because you can't be effective in your walk and in your relationship with God, because God is waiting for you to love Him back, and to accept the gifts that He is giving you, the blessings that He's giving you. So I sincerely hope that you'll think about that today and the next day and however long it takes. And Mike, thank you so much for having a conversation with us today. And if you like this video, please share it with someone, and be sure to hit the bell for future notifications. And for Mike Donaldson, this is Mark Sopowitz for A Clarion Voice.